Good morning, everybody. My name is Donkin from SuccessFlow. Welcome to the webinar this morning on developing a content strategy. I'll introduce my colleague in just a moment, but I just want to do a bit of housekeeping before we get going. The session today shouldn't take any longer than really 30 to 40 minutes. We'll try and keep it, moving along nicely. If you do have any questions, you'll see there's a question area. You can put up any question. We're probably not going to be able to answer them during the webinar, but we'll certainly look at those at the end. There are a couple of polls as well, so if you could definitely get involved with those. We've only got two. That would be great. Obviously, the session will go live on our channel afterwards. So if you can't make it for the whole thing, then please go check it out afterwards or share it with your colleagues. So if we move on. So, as I said, my name is Donkin. I'm one of the directors here at SuccessFlow. I'm joined today by my colleague, Karl Horton.
Good morning, everybody.
Karl's our creative director, so he's helped me pull this together. Obviously, it's a very big topic, and there's lots and lots of areas we could have covered in terms of content and content strategy. So we've tried to really focus on some key areas that we think would be valuable and would like to share with you. So what are we going to cover in this 30 to 40 minutes? So, first thing we're going to look at is getting to know your customer. So really going to focus on putting your customer at the heart of this thinking, how you're going to do that kind of planning and thinking at that research stage, building out personas and tone of voice, which Karl's going to cover. We're then going to look at how you can then meet their needs, and this is moved more into the kind of the customer journey, what touch points, channels and content you're going to need to develop that, and then finally we're going to look at your actual content that you have available. So looking at a kind of content audit, building a content framework, gap analysis, and planning out a content calendar. So, if we take the first poll, I'll launch it. You should see this pop up. It'll be up for 1 minute. So, what is your primary purpose for attending this webinar? It's a question we always ask. Just really looking to get some feedback. What's driving you to this? Is it, you're really at this early stages, you're looking at developing a content strategy, or you're a bit more advanced where you're looking at specific tactics to develop your current strategy. So you might have already started something, you might be pretty well advanced, or is it just kind of general interest, this is brand new to you and you're just looking at some general education. So I should be able to close that in just in 30 seconds, so if you can, if you've not answered, that would be much appreciated. Okay, a couple more seconds. Great, thank you very much. So I'll stop the voting now. Okay, so let's move on. So, know your customer. Quite an interesting little stat found here that, we all know that content is really key, but how key? So, 61% according to this study, customers' buying decisions are influenced by really customized content. I think that's the key here is customized to their needs, to them as an individual, not just generic content. So we're going to look at a bit of how we're going to do that. Quite an interesting thing is, to try and put your customer first, you need to move away from being an organized-centric culture. And obviously, everybody's guilty. We are of thinking in this way. What products can we sell to our clients? What services can we sell? What relationships do we need to introduce them to? Salespeople. Let's get the salespeople onto them. How can we make money from our clients? So, if you move away from that kind of thinking and then start to think more along the lines of what do our clients actually need to get done now, and how can we help them? What relationships do they expect from us? Not what we think we should be pushing on them. And what value can we actually add? And I think a nice little graphic that really shows that I think very simple but really effective. Firstly, we're going to look at getting to know, if I'm the customer, know me. I want to feel like you actually know me as a person, not just I'm just another wallet to you. Help me. There used to be an adage of always be selling. I think we're moving much more into the realm of always be helping. We want to be helping very early on and building up that trust. People are so time poor nowadays, especially decision makers and influencers, that you need to really make their life simple. Content, we're going to do that through content, but I think a good example of that is if you look at somebody like Uber, they've absolutely revolutionise the whole industry by really making something so simple. You know, not having to have money, being able to monitor where your cars are coming. You know, so if you look at that as an example, if you think about that, how can we really make our clients simple? As we're going to sell to them, we really need to start thinking about anticipating their needs, so understanding them and what stages are in the journey, so we can then anticipate their needs. But as we win as a customer, we don't want to forget about them. We want to reward them and turn them into advocates. So, first thing is do your research. Just really simple, but don't make assumptions. Actually do a bit of thinking. So workshops are a really good way of doing this, and we're going to cover this in a bit more detail, but you know, understand what problems you actually solve. Don't think necessarily about what products you sell, or services you sell. What do they actually solve? What benefits do they add? Why are we in business? Why do people purchase from us? Once you've understood that, then understand who you previously helped in those areas. So you can now start to build a picture, paint a picture of, well, look, this is what we actually do. This is why customers spend money with us. Who have we helped previously? And the best people to find out are speak to your employees, you know, especially salespeople or customer services. They're at the coalface. They really understand what that picture looks like for that customer. You know, why did we win this deal? Why is this customer a good advocate of ours, and how can we start to then build that out? So I'm going to hand over to Karl, who's going to touch upon now the power of personas and the tone of voice.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. Once you've kind of done the research, the initial research on your kind of audience and who they are, you kind of, most people have got their target audience defined. They know who they're speaking to. But just to highlight the point, this study conducted by Sintel showed that 71% of companies who exceeded revenue and lead goals have a documented persona, versus the 37% who only meet their goals and the 26% that actually miss them completely. Personas are kind of vital for knowing who your audience is and how to speak to them. Many kind of businesses we come across that have personas that don't actually use them. This is often because it's been created as a brand exercise, and while knowing that they drink a caramel macchiato from Starbucks is useful if you're a coffee reseller, it's of less use if you're a kind of global finance company. So the reason for them not being used is usually because they don't have the relevant information. So what I've got on screen now is I want to go through a couple of examples of different types of personas and how they can be used and developed. A persona exercise can be quite time consuming, so you don't have to kind of do it all at once. You can start small, but they do tend to cover the same, these examples cover the same kind of areas. So you've got the basic demographic information of where they are, age ranges, that kind of thing, salary, job titles, but also looking at their goals and their frustrations, a little bit of information about their personality, which is useful if you're trying to connect with them on an emotional level. You're more likely to be able to engage with somebody if you know what emotionally drives them, as well as what drives them from a business sense. And also, this particular one's got information about their kind of brands that they interact with. So recognizing the brands that they interact with can be a useful tip for kind of knowing how to speak to them. The one that's on screen now is kind of quite in-depth, and we can obviously see that they've got the basic information of their kind of key responsibilities, how they're evaluated, but it also goes on to more in-depth kind of view if you look at the tabs across the top. So their success factors, how are they evaluated? And also it kind of, on the far right-hand tab, it highlights their buyer journey, which I find is often left out on persona development, but we're going to come on to the buyer journey shortly. But obviously you can see by the amount of information on here, this will take quite a bit of time and research to gather, but you don't have to go to that extent first. So Marketing Mary on screen now is kind of just highlighted the key points. The information that's on there is bullet pointed, it's simple, it's straightforward, it's easy to understand, but you still get that kind of sense of who they are. So looking at what you should kind of include on your persona when starting, again, you can start with basic information, but the demographics, it's an obvious one, but it's useful to know if you're very focused on regional activity, then you might need to know a bit more about the demographics. Key characteristics, so highlighting bits about their personality. who you should speak to. The buyer journey, which I said earlier, we're going to come on to, which is often left out, and I find the most valuable part of a persona. What are their pain points? Their goals and values are always kind of good to know. What's driving them from a business decision? Social activity, where do they hang out socially? What kind of media do they consume, from trade publications, trade events, that kind of thing. It's always good to know what they're doing. And it's always good to kind of have a photograph of them. If you've got a picture of them, you can relate to them yourself on an emotional level. Knowing who they are and what they look like is so much easier to talk to them. So it's a lot. There's various ways of kind of gathering this information. So you've got kind of desk research, looking on LinkedIn for job titles, see what their roles are, what groups and channels they kind of hang out in, what information they share. The best way to get it is conducting interviews. So talk to salespeople who are speaking to these people on a daily basis, customer service interactions, and customers themselves. So we've all got customers, and I'm sure we've all got some customers that we've got some great relationships with that won't mind a kind of 10-15 minute interview with some really focused questions on things like what they're trying to achieve, and more importantly, what gets in their way. So what's important to them and driving that change? What's impeding their decision or the change, such as industry changes? Is it something that's a business decision that's being changed, or is it being forced by something that's happening in the industry? Where do they go about finding information for that change? What are they researching? Where are they researching it? What do they value as? What does value look like at the end of it? So what are they going to see as success by making this purchase decision? Also, who else do they have to sell to internally to get stakeholder buy-in? So there's kind of lots of information to find, but it's really good if you can just start by identifying your personas by job role. It's a really simple thing to do. Most people already have this. Prioritize them into primary and second personas. So think about who's making the decision, but don't ignore the people who are actually influencing that decision as well. So if you've got, I came across one workshop around the other not that long ago, and the primary decision maker was a financial advisor. So they were massively focused on content for this financial advisor. But then during the workshop, it came out that 80% of the research and consideration stage, so much earlier in the buyer journey, is done by the paraplanner. So they weren't talking to the paraplanner to be able to get that information to the buyer. So you've got this kind of premium piece of content that you've got aimed at the CEO. It's not even getting to them because the person who's influencing that decision along the journey is not passing the information through. So you're not speaking to the right people earlier in the journey. So once you've kind of got to know who they are, what drives them, where they hang out, and what they do, you need to know how to speak to them. So if you look at kind of organisations like, and big brands like Apple and Innocent and Uber, their tone is instantly recognisable. I've read a few articles recently on tone of voice, and there's a bit of a debate to whether a B2B organisation needs a tone of voice like a B2C. But if you take Innocent, for example, the tone that they use is fantastic. It relates to their audience perfectly. Everybody likes what they write on their product. And it encourages that kind of interaction with the brand. And quite often I kind of see brand guidelines and they talk about having one voice and use professional language, but it's a paragraph of introduction of how to kind of interpret their tone of voice, but it doesn't back it up with any kind of form of tactics or information of actually how to use them. So having one voice and using the professional language is great if you explain what it means, but if you don't, it's just kind of a paragraph of nondescript words that nobody knows how to use, and it kind of gets ignored. So in my opinion, yes, you do need a tone of voice. It helps you tell your story, it helps you relate to the person on a one-to-one level. Obviously your target audience is thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands potentially. But how do you communicate with that many people on a one-to-one level? So making this content really personalised. Professor Mehrabian, who was a pioneer of understanding communications in the 60s, he developed, he did a lot of research on how we communicate. Sorry, I've just clicked too far. Let's go back to that one. Of how we communicate and how we understand messages. And he came up with the fact that 55% of the message is pertaining to the feelings and the attitudes. It's all related in facial expression. 38% is much more about the paralinguistics, so how we say what we're saying, and only 7% of it is in the actual words that we use, which is fine when you're talking to somebody face to face. But obviously in the written world, we lose half of that ability to get that message across. So that puts 15% on the message is only about the words we use, and then nearly 80% of it is how we say it, the paralinguistics, so the tone that we're using, the message that we're trying to get across, how we use those particular words. It's so important to get that right. So, as I said earlier, I often see brand guidelines, and they kind of have this paragraph, which is not useful because it doesn't explain how to do them. So I've just got an example of a couple of bits that I've pulled out from what I think are really good kind of things to have. So this is the introductory paragraph of the kind of one voice statement, but it's emotional, it's connective, you want to understand it. So I'll just read through it. We are one of the most recognised and trusted companies in the world, and we safeguard that status through consistency in customer experience and reinforcement of the brand, how we look, act and sound. So when everything we do and say tells the same story, a single identifiable personality emerges. So it's about talking to people on an individual level, but from a corporate point of view, it's across the entire company, and everybody uses this same tone of voice, and it comes across as really well from the brand's perspective. So offer writing tactics of how to do it. So that sentence, that paragraph is great, but if you don't kind of elaborate on how to apply that, then people won't understand it and won't use it. So tactics like write like you talk, tell a story, lead with a benefit, be straightforward and specific. These kind of things give actionable advice on how people can apply that. Taking it to another stage, start talking about your personality. So this is the personality of your brand rather than anything else. So trusted partner, it immediately commands respect. So when you're writing and coming up with messages, it's from an authoritative figure. Conversational is a great one. People engage in conversations, and that's the point of reading something and getting that reader to engage so that you can get your message across. Make sure it's easy to understand. It's kind of an obvious one, but people tend not to do it because you're too focused on using industry words or corporate words that don't really mean anything to somebody who's not necessarily within that organisation. Positive and energetic, liberating and empowering, they're all emotional words to kind of drive people to use this tone. A good thing to do is highlighting buzzwords. We're all guilty of them. I'm sure Mark is, of using words that make people cringe. There's a few on here. Low-hanging fruit's one personal one of mine that if I hear somebody say it, we kind of know what it means, but it doesn't really explain what you're trying to say. It's a shortcut to something that can get misinterpreted. So make sure you're kind of clear in what you're trying to say. Try not to use too many buzzwords. Also offer a writing style as well. So this one particularly, they've got 3 different styles which I'll go through. Factual. So rather than this test is amazingly fast, which doesn't really say much, it doesn't give it a sense of perspective, so be factual. This test provides results in just 10 minutes. They've got an instant relation to what you're saying. Be positive, so we empower people to make faster decisions. It's quite a bold statement. The words that you use you emotionally relate to, so rather than we get people to stop making slow decisions, which is more of a negative attitude. And then finally, the conversational element, which I really like. So we provide products that help you. That, in a conversational sense, is usually responded by, so how can you help me? That encourages the reader to read beyond that opening sentence to then find out the message, and you get your point across of how you can help them. So rather than the company manufacturer's offerings that help many customers, which again is that kind of nondescript, doesn't really say anything, message that you're trying to get across. So just to close up on the personas, this study, although it's a couple of years old, I still kind of see it and have this conversation in workshops that we run, that the focus is always on the decision maker. I mentioned it earlier about kind of not forgetting the influencers. So throughout the kind of customer journey, you're more likely to be speaking to influencers earlier on in the journey, and then you get to the decision makers don't necessarily come into the journey until halfway through and much nearer the conversion stage. So the people who actually sign the check, hold the purse strings, they won't get to the information that you've found if the influencer hasn't recommended it, which kind of then takes us nicely on to our customer journey section. So the customer journey is very much about knowing their needs. So with the first section, we've got to know the customer. We know who they are. We now know how to speak to them. We now need to know what they want. This kind of quote from Bernd Schmidt's relatively famous. I've kind of seen it on quite a few things, that customer experience management is the process of strategically managing a customer's entire experience with a product or company. Kind of sums it up very well. What we're trying to do is we're managing their journey through the brand interaction, through the content that they consume, and with the tone and the persona work that you can do, you can then personalise and customise that content so that it is speaking to them on a one-to-one basis. So the common kind of 5-point model for this customer journey comes across research, consideration, acquisition, conversion, and retention. Now I'll go into these points in a little bit more detail, but what we often find is this is a really good starting point, but this doesn't have to be the way that you do it. You can tailor these stages to your own proposition. What we find occasionally is that the difference between the acquisition stage and the conversion stage, there isn't enough definition, so we kind of merge that just into the conversion stage. We've done that with a few clients that we work with, because you just can't define the difference. There's not enough to have two separate stages. So what are the stages? The research stage is very much focused around, as it says, the research. So people are out there looking for information. They might have a problem that they're trying to find a solution. They might not even know they've got a problem, so they're just generally doing industry research, looking for statistics, that kind of thing. So you've got to kind of educate them to let them know that they've got a problem and they need to be thinking about something. Then moving into the consideration stage, this is where they're starting to evaluate products, brands, companies, services, starting to just do a little bit more investigation. So you're more likely, you're kind of trying to get into that shortlisting phase of if they've researched, they've found a few things that they're interested in, they're starting to consume more content, they're starting to shortlist down to kind of towards the acquisition stage. And if you're not kind of approaching these people correctly in the research stage, then you're not even going to get considered. So there's not going to be a smooth transition across. And again, you're constantly building up that brand trust as you go through this journey, making sure that the experience is consistent and it's relevant to them. So moving into the kind of acquisition stage, once they've kind of considered that they've made their shortlist of who they're going to approach for this decision that's to be made, they're going to really start to kind of interact with your brand on a much more personal level. So this is where it's more likely to be face-to-face, looking at meetings. If you're a software provider, then potentially looking at one-to-one demos, and offering that kind of level of personal contact with them. And if you get that right, then hopefully they'll move into the conversion stage. So this is obviously where we need to provide a compelling reason for them to sign, to get that purchase or subscription. So giving them the information that they need to be able to make that decision. And this, as I said earlier, this is where kind of the acquisition and the conversion stage is much more where the decision maker comes in. So the research stage and consideration, you're potentially more likely to be talking to influencers rather than just the decision makers. And then obviously don't forget about them. Once you've kind of got that purchase, first-time customers will become advocates and loyalists through nurturing post-sales. So providing that after-sales support, making sure the onboarding process is smooth, giving them the support and the information and the guidance they need early on. So what we do again, as Mark mentioned, we kind of do this, we're very focused on running facilitated workshops to get this information. It works really, really well. Start with kind of post-it notes, get all the key people in the room and work out what your persona's needs are across this customer journey. So So looking at kind of insights, competitors, new technology, available technology, what kind of skill sets do we need for something? These are kind of some of the subjects that you might be thinking about within the research stage. So if you take, for example, somebody's looking for a new piece of technology, a marketing automation platform, for example, they're going to start to look at, within the consideration stage, best of breed, who's out there, what suppliers out there, who's are the partners, things like compatibility and integration moving into the consideration stage and the acquisition stages. How will that work for me? What are the benefits? What value can it provide for my business, our business? Then into the acquisition stage, as I said, this is much more personal, so you're going to be looking at providing a one-to-one demo, providing more tech-heavy information, so you've got the kind of the right people in the room, you're talking to the stakeholders, you kind of providing them with the information they need to make this decision. The conversion stage is usually very much focused around cost, delivery processes, timescales, that kind of thing. So it's reassuring them that they can get the product that they want in the timescale they need. And the retention phase, don't forget about them. Make sure that onboarding process goes well and you've got that support. So once you kind of in a workshop environment, just write these down on a post-it note and just pin them up in these categories across these stages. So this is all about the needs, what they want across the stages. Once you've got that, you need to work out then what's going to stop them moving through the journey. So look at the blockers. Example, for this guy who's looking for his marketing automation platform, if you've got a website that's got poor SEO rankings, you've not got content that's going out there, they're not even going to find your initial research content. So they're not going to start to go down your buyer journey because you're not giving them what they want at that stage. So you might have lots of really, really quality premium content that's aimed at the acquisition and conversion stage, but if you haven't got the snackable content that's up front, they're not going to even start that journey. So think about what's stopping them across each of these phases. Again, get these post-its on the board. Once you've kind of gone through the needs and the blockers, then look at how they're touching your brand. Social media, webinars, guides, blogs, it's all out. We all know what kind of content we consume, but we consume it at different stages, and your persona will consume different content at different stages. So make sure this is mapped to your personas. Look at the channels that they visit. So in the research stage, it needs to be much lighter touch, so social, blogs, forums, email newsletters, that kind of thing. Within the consideration stage, events, white papers, potentially looking at coming in there, webinars, as we are today. Acquisition stage, much more personal, face-to-face demos, providing them calculators so that they can work out ROIs and proof points to get that kind of stakeholder buy-in. Conversion, you're starting to look more about the sales collateral, making sure your sales team have got the right material they need to provide, the proposals that get sent out, product information sheets if they're needed. And then the retention stage, again, it's that personal level. So account management meetings, making sure that they have the information and the content and the collateral that they might need at a meeting, and offering that kind of interactive support phase to making sure that they feel like they're supported. So with your kind of target audience defined, you've got your personas prioritised, you know how to speak to them, who they are and what their journey is, you then obviously need to start looking at your content. So I'm going to hand you back to Mark for this section.
Okay, thanks, Karl. So just not much longer now, but what I wanted to bring up here was this is a graphic that we use quite regularly, developed by Smart Insights, who we partner with. You may well know Dave Chaffee. He developed this as part of the content matrix. So this is just a standard one off their website, but you can develop something like this. Now you know your customer journey, and now you have your personas. So on the left-hand side there, you've got your emotional to rational decision thinking from your audience. So as you get those personas, you might see, we think this individual is going to be more at the emotional end of the spectrum, or they're going to be much more at the rational end of the spectrum. And then across the top axis there, we've got from in this case awareness to purchase, but they would that would be your customer journey there. And then in the centre, we've got lots and lots of different content types that could be used. Now, again, in a workshop environment, you can start to then think about what content can we produce? What do we have the capability to produce based on the resources available to us, and that might be budget or time or people. But then we can start to map out where that's going to fit in there, and we can start to see where we want to map that in that matrix. So if we've got a persona that's we feel is much more emotional, we're going to need to create much more kind of content, maybe that's more viral, fun, entertaining. Where if we're looking at a much more serious buyer, then we might want more fact-based, educational, right through where we want to convince them to buy. So definitely good exercise is know your content today. Everybody's got content available. Interesting fact there that Microsoft stated that 30% of Microsoft's own content has never actually even been visited. So just producing content is expensive to produce, time-consuming. So we want to make sure it's going to be consumed, and it's going to not just be consumed, but it's going to fit into our customer journey and be relevant to our personas as we described. So this is just a pull out. We just pulled out some of our content just to give you a snapshot there. That's a list of all the content that we have, and if you go look on the website, you'll see that. But what is the content? What's its description? What type of content is it? Is it a webinar, a guide? What is it? Where is it actually hosted? Because you can host content. It's not necessarily just in your CMS. It could be on Vimeo. It could be within your marketing automation platform. What area does it focus on? I mean, we've got 4 key focuses around marketing, strategy, creative, and technology. So we need to know what it relates to, because ultimately we want to know which persona that's working through, and what state is it in? Is it a state that can be used and published? Once we've kind of done that audit, then we can then start to look at mapping that into what we class as more of a framework. So you can see there we've numbered each to make it easy to view each of those assets. And this is a typical example where we've now got on the left-hand side here the different asset types we can produce and we want to produce, and then we've got our customer journey across the top. But where does all that content fit? And more importantly, where are the gaps? So we see this quite regularly when we go and meet clients, is that marketing will focus on spending that budget on the very top of the funnel, so driving traffic through that research type content, generating kind of premium type content to generate leads. But as we get further into that customer journey, it starts to peter off, so we're not getting the content to support, the sales process or convert the opportunity, and that's where we might start to look at more nurturing type content. And then definitely at the end is that retention. So we definitely need to be looking at our customer, not forgetting them. It's not all just about net new business. So it's good exercise to do that, to look at where those particular gaps are. So just going to take another quick poll here. Just want to understand a little bit about, this is multiple choice, I believe. So it's really looking at what aspects of a content strategy have you already developed. Now there could be lots, but we just picked out a few here. Customer journey, personas, content audit, content framework. So customer journey, have you actually sat down and developed, well, what is the steps that our audience go through? Personas, obviously, have we developed some personas that we can then produce content for? Content, have you actually done a content audit? And have you developed a content framework?
Sorry, I'm just not sure if we've got a couple of technical issues on the poll. We're starting to get a couple of votes coming in now.
We'll leave it up for him. If you could answer that, be great. We'll use that as part of the feedback.
So I think we had a bit of a delay on the technical side of there, so we'll just leave it up a little bit longer, just give people a chance to submit their vote.
Once we close this, we're going to just do a wrap up, and then we'll be done. Okay. I'll close the vote up. Thank you for taking that. Okay, so just to just to summarise, I want to just do a few takeaways here. Definitely go back to the start of this. If you're going to go on this journey or you're already on it, you might want to start again and just do that research. Start that thinking, those workshops again. Where we'll bring in the right stakeholders, right employees, speak to customers, do that research, do those interviews where we can start to develop that customer and content strategy. Definitely look at mapping that customer journey by persona. Obviously, we do have clients where their audience is so niche, they're dealing with a very, very specific segment that there is only one persona. But it's really important to understand, still develop that persona, even if it's only one, so you understand how you're going to then develop your content around that. And absolutely understand the needs at each stage of the customer journey, the blockers, and what content you're going to develop. Conduct that content audit. That's a quick win, potentially. You might be able to find that you've got content that can be repurposed, reworked into your customer journey. There might be content out there that you didn't even know you had. And look at what you've got. Not only that, if you're doing that content audit, you might find that you've got content that doesn't fit into your strategy at all and shouldn't be there and needs to be taken down because it's just not relevant anymore. Understand what the content is for, what the purpose of it is for. See this quite often. We'll create a guide, or we're just going to create an ebook. Well, what for? Where does it fit into the customer journey? Which persona is it developed for? So we don't just want to waste money on content that's going to add no value. And absolutely, this is not a one-off exercise. We would typically do this quarterly. So you do that workshops and information gathering. Look at those customer journeys, look at that persona. Obviously, the first time we run it, it's where you need to put a lot of effort in, but it's something you've got to keep developing. Got to keep developing that content for your audience. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining today. We are more or less bang on time. We will obviously this is being recorded. It will go up on our channel. Please connect with us. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'll probably reach out and just introduce myself. You can contact us on email or visit our website. We'll hang on for a few more minutes just to see if there is any questions, and we may well just answer them on here.
So just as an addition, there was an interesting fact from the polls that customer journey came back as 33%, personas 16%, and content audit 25%. No percent on content framework, which is kind of useful that people are looking at the customer journey, kind of looking at personas and starting to kind of put that into a content audit, but then not doing anything with it. So the content framework would really help you develop that next step of how to kind of use the content.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, sorry, go on.
So, we've just got one question in about what are your views on creating connected content when focusing towards partner programs, resellers, and not direct customers. Absolutely. We do it ourselves. We kind of have a few technology partners that we very much focus producing content solely for them that helps them provide the service as well. So we're kind of creating a relationship with them. We can look at what the information they need, to look at what they need along the buyer journey, what types of content do they consume, and what types of content do the end user consume as well. So who are they passing it on to? Who are their customers? And can we help them bridge that gap and help the customer journey, help them through that customer journey and smooth that transition? So definitely, it's a key thing to kind of keep looking at your partners as well as your customers. Sorry, I was just reading another question that came in then. Considering your thoughts on brand tone of voice, would you recommend hiring a ghostwriter to draft content? Yes, if you haven't got the ability yourself in-house to produce that kind of content, as long as you can define the tone, you know your customers, and you know what tone you need to speak to them. If you need to hire a professional in to help you get to that stage, then it can be something that's definitely needs to be considered. If you feel that you're not relating to your audience on a professional tone, you're losing that message, then, and you need that additional support, then definitely there's agencies out there. We do it for our clients as well. We do it as part of the workshop. We do a bespoke tone of voice to help them do it. Give them those tactics. So the examples that we showed earlier, go that stage further from just having a paragraph that kind of says, yes, let's speak in one voice, let's all use professional language and don't use slang. And the common things that you see in brand guidelines. But if you need that support, then by all means, go out there and get that to help you get that message across.
Got a question here about what are your views on creating a connected content when focusing towards partners, resellers?
Yeah, that was the first one. Again, like I say, we do have the partners, and we do focus on them. So definitely.
Okay. Any questions that we've not answered? And there is a few on here that are really kind of in depth, where we need to follow up. We'll definitely follow up on those. We'll pull all these out and we'll have a look. I think we've run out of time for today, so thank you very much for taking time out of your diaries to join us. We'll follow up with communication, and we hope to see you on another webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.